Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell in the upper right-hand corner. Follow me on all forms of social media. Check me out at thatdrummerguy.com and enjoy the following presentation. Hello?
Hi, is this Josh?
Yes, it is.
Hey, this is Jason Hartless. How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking time to do this interview.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time.
Oh, not a problem. Well, of course, you're talking about everything that you got going on right now, and it's just I've been reading up on everything that you've been going on lately, and it's just it's incredible to see the journey that you've been able to accomplish so far in your drumming career. I mean, no matter who you've played with, starting off at such a young age and being able to play, and all the accomplishments that you got going on now. I mean, it's so incredible to see all of it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. So, of course, recently you just got off of tour. I mean, what was that like for you to be able to do a nice summer tour like that?
Well, this was my third year touring with Ted Nugent, and I can't say enough great things about playing with him, and every single year it gets better and better and better, and I can't say enough great things.
Yeah, and that's just so cool to see that too. And I imagine, after 3 years, just being able to just like really nail those songs and just being so comfortable with that, and hitting all across America, being able to play such legendary songs as well.
Absolutely. It's even last year during my second tour with him, it was definitely very, very comfortable with the tunes, and relatively we stick to the same list of songs that we do every year. Just changed up a little bit, and by this year I've been so comfortable and played these songs so many times that it's very, very very natural and very second nature. And what's great about playing with Ted is even though we've got a written out set list, it changes pretty much every single night, and there's various songs that incorporate a lot of improvisation. So it's definitely kind of taken this old school way of just jamming and playing these iconic songs.
Yeah, and I do miss that in so much of music that's going on. I mean, there is so much of just like making sure that there is no improvisation and making sure that everything was the way that it was recorded on record. Sometimes it's just great for a band to be able to go up and extend some solos or do some jam sessions or just do some nice improv moments. So it's really awesome to see that you're able to do that with such a legendary act.
Well, it's funny because I think the question I get asked the most out of anything involving with Ted is, so do you use a click, or are you guys using backing tracks? And it's like, no, my click is Ted Nugent counting off every song.
Yeah, and it's just like from everything that I've ever seen of him, just like it's 100% just like based on feel, and I think that's so important for a live show. I mean, being able to play with a metronome and making sure that everything is as tight as possible is such a great thing in so many different ways, but there's something to be said of being able to play with that feel, being able to do some improv, extend parts that need it, shorten parts that need it, and just make for the best possible live experience.
Absolutely. It's funny because we'll be in the middle of a song that and he'll just on the fly just call out, keep going. And actually it happened once this tour. We were playing one of the new songs off the new record that's coming out, and it's usually not a song that we do improv on, and he's in the middle of the solo and he's absolutely feeling it, and literally a bar before we were going into the next section, he calls out, keep going. And with him, you always got to keep one eye and one ear on him at all times, because you never know what he's going to do and say and change up and go in a different direction.
So with that said, I mean, unfortunately the tour didn't come by my way on this tour, so I didn't get to see any new live songs, but what was it like for you to be able to not only being able to play some classic material from him, but also being able to play some new material as well?
Well, when we went into the studio to track the record beginning of this year, it was the first, being with Ted for 3 years, this was the first time we've been in the studio since I've been in the band. And really my background being conventionally a studio session musician, I was really in my comfort zone, and it was kind of strange for Ted and our bass player, because they didn't really fully understand my background in the studio, because coming into it, they've only played with with me on stage and live and only know me as this, bashing, hard-hitting live drummer. But that's really what the live gig calls for. So coming into the session, I approach it not as Jason Hartless, the drummer of Ted Nugent. I approached it as Jason Hartless, the session player playing on this new Ted Nugent record. So we were blocked about 2 weeks to go down to Waco, Texas, and record it. And we had 2 days set aside to kind of sit in a room, myself, bass player, and Ted, and have Ted show us the material, and then learn it, and then kind of played a few times so we got comfortable. And then the rest of the time there, we were going to spend ideally it was to track one song a day. Drums, bass, and a rhythm guitar, and then finish out the rest of that track that day with the rest of the guitars and vocals and whatnot. But we sat down and we tracked it live. We played to a click in the studio, but it was still a very live feel because we're all sitting there in a studio, basically 5 feet from each other, and we tracked the first song, and then it ended up we just kept going and tracked the entire record in 5 hours.
Oh wow!
So it's. As I've been telling a lot of people, is this record is going way back to the old school feel of recording. We tracked it live, even though we did use a click. It doesn't feel at all like we're to a click. The songs and the riffs, and even Ted himself, when we were on the plane flying back home to Michigan a few days ago, he was even like, there was something about these riffs on this record, guitar riffs, that just capture this, the vibe of his feel from the 70s, which is 100% true. And I think it correlates with having it tracked live, and also myself and the bass player being seasoned session musicians. So we were able to we know what to play and what not to play in these tunes.
Yeah, and that's going to be really rewarding for you as well. I mean, not only being able to record with such a legendary artist, but being able to do something that isn't always necessarily done in 2018. I mean, being able to have that really great live feeling that's going on, rather than just recording a part, having to stop, then recording the next part, and then stopping. I mean, being able to have that live organic feel.
Absolutely. I mean, and really what comes along with that is, we're every single time we play the song, there might be, a little something different arrangement wise. I know, like, at the end of the title track of the record, Music Made Me Do It, we had this like crazy like Who ending that just goes bonkers at the end. And what's happening during that part in the studio is we're just kind of watching Ted, waiting for him to kind of signal when we're changing. And what ended up happening on the take that went on the record is that there's actually a bar of 6 in there, because we were just kind of going with the flow and just waiting for Ted to say, all right, we're going to the next part. So it's very that type of stuff doesn't happen when you're tracking how normal records are done nowadays.
And with that, I mean, obviously with being so established in so many different styles and being able to fill in, whether it be at session work or live shows or whatever the case is, what kind of setup did you use when recording this album?
Every studio situation is different. So with this record, I tried to almost mimic what I normally use on stage, which typically is just a standard jazz setup. 24, 14, 12, 14 floor, and then a 16 floor. But Pearl Drums and I were trying to figure out, or we were trying to find a kit somewhere in Dallas to Dallas or even Austin to rent for the studio session. So we ended up finding a kit at a backline company in Austin, which ended up being a mid 2000s Pearl MMX maple kit. And the interesting thing is that the only kick drum that they had available at the time was a 2418, which I hadn't used a kick drum that long before. So I was really interested to see how it was going to sound, but it blew my mind how controlled it was, considering how big. And then, there was no 14-inch floor tom available, but there was a 18-inch floor tom. So I ended up using larger floor toms than I do in the studio. I mean, than I do live. I mean, but yeah, the kit was absolutely phenomenal, and I was very, very surprised how great the kick drum sounded considering how large it was.
Oh yeah, and ever since I started playing, I mean, the very first kit that I ever bought was a Pearl Export, and I've just been a Pearl fan ever since those days. And it's always great to see in 2018. I mean, with so many different drum brands that are out there, that Pearl not only can still make consistently amazing drums, but they're still getting used, even if it's like over a decade old, being able to be used in 2018 albums and just have that great feel to them.
Well, I've been known as a Pearl drums freak. I have a pretty large collection of vintage Pearl kits and drums dating all the way back to the late 50s, around the time when Pearl really started moving. And I think I'm up to 15 or 16 kits, and then about 35 snare drums.
Oh, wow.
Consisting of vintage and modern stuff. And it's really great as a player. I've played Pearl literally my entire life, because the first kit I ever played on and learned how to play on was my dad's late 80s Pearl World Series kit. And just as I got older, my parents got me a Pearl Export kit for Christmas when I was about 5. And when I got older and started listening to all the other drums, I've always stuck with Pearl, because there's just something about them that I've always loved. And I got endorsed by them in 2005 when I was 10, and I've been with them for 13 years as an artist. And everybody over there is like family, and then again over the years I've become a drum hoarder and collecting vintage Pearl drums, and I just acquired probably one of the rarest Pearl drums in the world, which was a 1969 Pearl Bulgy snare drum.
Oh, wow.
Which to my knowledge there is only 2 that really exist. It showed up in the catalog in '69 and disappeared after that, and only 2 have really been documented to exist. And the 2 that are existing have very different features, and the only other one besides the one I now own was not fully complete. But it kind of was very reminiscent in Pearl's attempt to replicate the duplex snare drums from the 40s. And when I saw this snare drum and had the opportunity to buy it, I kind of I emailed some historians that have worked for Pearl in the past and know the brand backwards and forwards, and hey, what do you know about this drum? Is it worth it? Have you seen this drum? And the feedback that I got was like, buy it right now. So it was not something that I was going to pass up, especially being a Pearl collector.
Oh, absolutely. So with that, I mean, how does it sound? I mean, is it like held up well and all of that?
Well, what's strange about it, I actually I was on tour when I bought it, and it actually showed up to my house the day we were playing Detroit. So I was able to see it because my parents brought it to the venue. I was able to see it, didn't play it though. First time I played it was 2 days ago. And it's very strange because it is a 14-inch diameter head, but the shell, buckles out to where the shell is actually the size of a 15-inch drum. So you get this very strange feel. Now, normally I don't use Remo Ambassadors on my snare drums, but this one came with a brand new one. So that's the only thing I've really heard it with. So eventually I'm going to put a Remo Emperor X, which is what I normally use on the snare, to try to see what it sounds like. But just on first impressions, it's a very wide sounding drum, but you're able to get a little more sensitivity off of the drum since it's actually a 14-inch head, but you're on a 15-inch drum.
Oh, that just sounds so unique and so cool. I mean, it's gonna be really cool. I mean, especially once you get the heads that you're looking for on there. And I'm the same way. I love the Remo Emperor X. I mean, anytime I use that on a snare, it just sounds so incredible to be able to do that. But once you get that on there, you get get the right tuning and you're able to mess around with it, I mean, I can just imagine it's going to sound incredible.
Absolutely, and what I usually do every single time I'm on the road, I always end up buying, one or two or three snare drums. So I came home to that snare drum, a early '90s brass free floater that's a 14 by 3.5, which was very similar to what Jeff Beccaro used in his latter days. And then a 1969 Pearl President snare drum in a blue sparkle, which is actually the same color that I had on my new Ted Nugent tour kit. And but what's strange about the drum is it has a phenolic shell, which was a very rare type of wood fiber material that Pearl used for a very, very small bit in the late '60s on these President drums. And so it's a very hard material, so the drum will never go out of round. And actually, Eric Singer from Kiss is who turned me on to these drums, and he actually found me a full set of these about a year ago, and I snatched that one up.
Yeah, I would have been the same way. I mean, had the opportunity to be able to get that. And, it's so great to see how much you really do love Pearl drums. I mean, you're willing to invest that much and, be it space and financial and everything like that. I mean, it is such a great company. I've loved them ever since I started playing when I was 9, and just like seeing that you really are doing that. And every time you go out on tour, always looking for new Pearl drums, be it vintage or brand new or whatever the case is. I mean, it's awesome to see that.
Yeah, I mean, really every single, because with Ted we tour once a year, and it's about June to August. This year was a little shorter. We only did 6 weeks, but typically we do about 8 to 10 weeks. And when we go out, I always try to figure out how can I elevate my setup. And I've always been one of those guys that tries to keep my setup very, very simple and clean. Only use 3 toms, 1 up, 2 down, and then kick, snare, and then 2 crashes, China, ride cymbal, hi-hat. That's all you need. So how I always try to make the setup better is by trying different snare drums. And since I've been with Ted for 3 years, I've used and tried out probably about 5 to 6 different snare drums, and I think we finally settled on one that really, really, really sounds great in terms of replicating this old school sound that we're trying to go for, but on top of very modern appeal, which was a 14 by 5 Pearl beaded steel Sensitone. And I can't say enough things about that drum. And our front of house engineer, is a legend in the business and has worked with everybody under the sun. And him and I always were working to try to again, make the setup better and better and better and better. And he's always wanted me to get a Ludwig 402 Superphonic, but obviously I'm not going to do that since I play Pearl. And I think we finally found a drum that is able to capture that 70s superphonic sound in these Pearl Sensitone steel snare drums.
Oh yeah, and I've heard so many great things about them. I mean, I haven't been able to own one myself, but I've been able to mess around with them, and they do have that really nice classic vintage sound. But just like you said, it's modern enough to be able to keep up with the times, but just being able to harken back to those times as well. And it's great to see that you are able to use it for that type of music, and it works out so well.
Well, honestly, the drum that has really surprised me recently, and I used it as the backup on this tour, and then we used it as the main snare drum last year, is a Sensitone bronze snare drum. And I started using a bronze drum in the studio that I'm an in-house session guy at here in Detroit, Pearl Sound Studios, which is, it's just oddly enough called Pearl, but it has nothing to do with Pearl drums. And even though we use only Pearl drums at the studio, but the owner Chuck has a mid-90s 14 by 5 bronze Sensitone, and I'd never used a bronze drum before until I started doing sessions there, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So last year when I went to kind of get some new snares and try it out, I ended up getting a 14 by 6.5 version of the bronze Sensitone, and I can't say enough great things about that drum because you're getting this very metallic sound that you would expect out of a metal drum, but the fat overtones and really crack that you can get out of those drums is just mind blowing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been such a huge fan of bronze snares over the years, and I've always always wanted to pick up a pearl sensitone bronze for myself, just trying to find out what dimensions I want to get with it. But the one that you got, I mean, that just sounds absolutely incredible.
Well, and the thing is I usually like to do a little custom work on some drums, depending on. I actually ended up swapping out the stock lugs that come on those bronze drums with the tube lugs, because I've always found that the standard tube lugs that Pearl puts on their drums, you're able to get a little bit more of a overtones out of them, because they're not as heavy, they're a little bit lighter, and they look cool as hell too.
Oh, absolutely. I've been such a huge fan of the tube lugs that come with Pearl. I mean, my main workhorse snare, I got those tube lugs on there, and it looks so cool. And yeah, I mean, if you're able to customize that out and, just make that sensitone bronze even more of your own, I mean, go for it.
Yeah, it's again, it's definitely something that I've over the years have tried various little things to try it out. Actually, this year before this tour, because we weren't sure what snare we were going to use as the main, either the steel or the bronze. The bronze typically comes with the Pearl Super hoops on it, which is typically what I use, because I love triple flange. I've never been a fan of die cast. And we actually ended up buying a die-cast hoop for this drum in the middle of the tour, just from some random drum shop, just for the hell of it, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah, and it's funny how that works out too. I mean, with some drums being able to switch out the hoops or the logs or whatever the case is, I mean, it can really affect the tone for the better or for the worse. And who would have thought, just being able to switch out a die-cast like that, and adding that onto that drum would make it sound that cool.
Absolutely.
So, with all that said, I mean, obviously, when you're not on these summer tours with such a legendary act, I mean, just like you said, you're able to do such great session work. What is that like for you to be able to still be able to do that? Being known for being able to be on these incredible tours, but still being able to come home and do this awesome session work.
Well, I've always tried to kind of live my life and my career and build myself as a player to be the guy that can just say yes and do whatever job it can be in terms of playing drums. And that kind of goes back to the days of Hal Blaine and Jeff Porcaro and Jim Keltner and Jim Gordon, these guys in the 60s and 70s and even 80s that played on 80% of every single record that came out of LA. And those guys, they'd go from playing, pop ballads to playing funk music to playing jazz, because they're always in demand in terms of making sure that they can play any style that they're required to do. And that's what I've always tried to build my career and my playing to be able to do that. However, it's actually unfortunate that we're in the day and age where session players, aren't as necessary, because, a lot of, there's a lot of programming going on. There's a lot of, most times artists use the drummers that they use on the road. Hence the same situation with the new Ted Nugent record. He just called his road drummer, and which was myself. And you also have these artists up and coming, and they always have their buddy that can play drums, and they'll do the session for free. So why hire a session player? But that being said, I'm very lucky that I've been able to keep steady work in terms of playing with various artists in the studio, on top of licensing material, and even commercial jingles for major ad campaigns.
So with that, I mean, being able to have such a huge background in all these different styles and everything, when you were growing up and learning all these styles, what was the hardest part for you? Like a particular style or an idea of playing drums? What was the hardest for you to be able to accomplish and now you can do perfectly?
Well, the problem I had for the longest time is mainly when I was younger, I could not read music. And, I think it was something, unfortunately, when I was in, because I went through, K through 12 public school, and I was lucky that the public school district that I went to was very, very heavy performing arts based, so much so that, the NAMM organization has voted them the last 6 years, one of the top public school music programs in the country.
Oh, wow.
And I just so happened to live in that city. And, I had a lot of great teachers and in elementary and middle school and high school. But unfortunately, I think when I started in school band, mainly like 5th and 6th grade, I was always put on like a snare drum or a bass drum, or the rhythmic things, to make sure that the band's holding down on the rhythmic parts. So I never learned how to play mallet instruments, which now looking back, it really sucks, because I wish I could. And but even though I my reading at that point was very bad. I mean, because I could not do it, because I really wasn't. I didn't really take any formal one-on-one private lessons until I was about 13, 14. Before then I was, I'd studied with a lot of guys like Corky Lang and Tommy Clafettis and a few other guys around Detroit, but it was never like learning how to read music. It was learning how to be a, professional musician. And, come 2009, it was the summer before my 9th grade year, so going into high school. And actually, before I get to that, turn it back, I was in 7th grade, and my band director, Lance Wyszynski, he noticed, that I was really at that point only really concentrating on, a rock music or at least seeing that, I could potentially only be a rock drummer. And, he kind of took me into his office and was like, look, you need to learn how to play everything. You're not a rock drummer. You are a musician. And, it stuck with me. So I started working, my butt off. And then going back to the original story I was going to say, going into my 9th grade year into high school, that summer, I made marching band and drumline. But I did not make high school jazz band, 9th grade jazz band. And that summer, I toured with Motley Crue for 3 months, opening with one of their opening band. But yet, I could not make a high school jazz band. So that's really what hit me, and I was like, "Oh crap! This is embarrassing for myself. So I need to do something." So I ended up at that time starting weekly private lessons with this guy named George Dunn, who is like the top drum instructor in town. I mean, he's a legend in this town, and he's just this old jazz dude, and that's just a hard-nosed guy as a teacher, but he's one of the best players in town, and he whipped me into shape, man. And when I first started taking lessons from him, we started from square one. I mean, so early, like reading the first page in Haskell Har and stuff like that. So it was like very, very, very back to basics and starting from scratch. But, as time went on, I knew how to play all the rhythms. So now it was just kind of connecting the dots of how it visually looked on paper. And, I can't thank and credit, George enough for, basically turning me into a rock drummer, into a musician, a guy that, can read music, a guy that can play jazz. And he just so happened to also be the drumline instructor for my high school. So, he taught me all the marching and drumline stuff and all those rudiments and techniques and stuff. And then he also was the percussion ensemble, teacher. So, having him be my private teacher on top of just so happened to be my high school's in-house, percussion guy, it really, really, really helped. And, I that was the day that I went from being a meat potatoes drummer into being more of a finesse player.
Yeah, and that is just so incredible to be able to hear about that as well. And it's able to help you out so much as well. I mean, obviously it is so much fun playing rock music and being able to open all these tours, headlining all these tours, and of course still being able to do that now in 2018 for yourself. But just being able to be so much more than just one particular style, and being able to play so many different other styles, and being able to read music and really become a full-fledged musician like that. I mean, I can only imagine imagine that just benefits you so much for any opportunity that comes your way.
Well, I learned pretty quick that, when you only limit to yourself to being a rock drummer, to being a metal drummer, to being a jazz drummer, you get roped into that one category, and then what happens is you're literally cutting your opportunities by exponentially, because you never know where the, gig opportunities are coming from. And that's why I try to, image-wise, me as what I look like is very neutral in terms of, if I need to slick my hair back and do a big band jazz gig or something like that, I can do it, but I still got, long enough hair that I can, be the quote unquote rock star, on stage playing with Ted Nugent.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's so rewarding as well, too. I mean, especially for the creative mind, being able to spread your wings and being able to play so many different styles, because you never know when a particular style is going to come back and work for something else. I mean, I can imagine, just being in a classical sense, being in a big band sense, being in a rock or a metal sense, it's just like there's so many inspirations that can come from so many different forms of music.
Well, it's funny, and I've been actually telling the story a lot lately, is, earlier this year, I was on the road with Joel Turner, who, he sang for Rainbow and Deep Purple for many years. And, we did like a Midwest run. It was, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, I think, something like that. And we had a gig in St. Louis, and the next day I had a session back in Detroit. So that session back in Detroit was a big band session for a Christmas album. That the horn section was guys from Bob Seger's band. So I go from, classic rock metal to the next day I'm playing on a big band Christmas album.
Yeah, and that is just so cool that you're able to pull that off as well. I mean, it does kind of harken back to what you were talking about before, just like not being able to get into the high school jazz band, but being able to open for Motley Crue at the same time. But, it's just like now you're at that point where, you can play with one of the most legendary voices in metal, Joel Turner, and then turn around and do a big brass Christmas album. That is just so cool.
Yeah, and, that's really the center of why I love doing, what I do so much, is because, being and I think myself as a session player and as a touring musician completely different. And, I might have mentioned this earlier when we did the Ted Nugent record, I wasn't looking at myself as, the drummer of Ted Nugent when we did the record. I was looking at it like the session guy on this record. So, being able to juggle and try different things, and every single session is going to be different, is really key. Being able to, and honestly, 90% of the sessions, if not more, that I do, I don't hear the songs until about 5 minutes before. So, being on the spot, being, very, very under pressure is really what keeps it fun, because you never know what's going to happen, and everything's different.
Oh, yeah, and I'm very much of that style as well. It's like, I do love having that pressure of like, okay, I only got 5 or 10 minutes. I can only hear the song about once or twice before I go in and record it. And, just being able to get that first time feel of what to do with it. I mean, whether I'm reading music myself or I improv over it or whatever the case is, just having that pressure of like immediately hearing the song and then going and putting your spin on it.
Absolutely. I try as much as try is actually not a good enough word, but I attempt, I should say, to kind of model my career and my overall mindset of how I approach my career very much like Jeff Porcaro. And, and the fact that, he just was the guy that just did it all. And, on top of him being one of my biggest influences as a player, him as how his career was modeled is just, very much what I try to achieve.
Well, I can definitely say, I mean, being able to forge your own path, of course, with it. I mean, it definitely seems that like you are on that road and you've already accomplished so much when it comes to that. And, it's going to be amazing to see what's going to be going on with the future of that as well, with all the different opportunities that will be able to come your way in all styles of music, whether you're reading music, whether you're doing improv, whether you're playing heavier music, lighter music, big brass music, whatever the case is. I mean, the fact that you're so well adapted right now and being able to play all these different styles, I just can't wait to see what's coming next.
Yeah, I can only hope, good things. Because really, in this business, and honestly, any business, you never know what the future holds. So that's why I kind of take the mindset of moving one day at a time. And I can look into the future all I want, but in the music industry, you can be doing one thing the next, and then get a call the next day to do something completely different. Very very similar to when I got the call for the Ted Nugent gig. I was touring with an artist that had a lot of promise, called Pistol Parade, and the band ended up disbanding right before we were about to have a number one hit single on Active Rock Market. And I kind of went into because it was very much the movie That Thing You Do. The storyline is almost identical to the situation that I had with Pistol Parade. And kind of backtracking, we had so much financial and industry backing on that on behind the band and on our record, that after I graduated high school in 2013, I kind of decided, I'm going to kind of take a break on going to college and kind of see where this band goes, because again, we had there was a lot of industry buzz in terms of we were going to be the next breakout active rock band. And so we ended up touring once the record came out in fall of 13. We ended up touring with Ted Nugent in 2014 for about 2.5 months, and during that time we released this single that was supposed to be our big breakout single, which was called Rockstar's Girlfriend. And during that tour, there was a lot of band issues going on, so the band ended up, disbanding after the tour. And but during that tour, we were told, like, look, by the end of this year, that song is going to be number one. So there was a guaranteed that it was projected to go number one. So it was very interesting why the band blew up, but you don't know. A lot of people are afraid of success, I believe. But that being said, after that band blew up, I kind of was in a depression of what the hell am I going to do? I wasn't, I was at the brink of, making it with, quote unquote, making it with with original band and going from high, what's the word? Going from extreme, geez, I can't even think of the word. My mind's going blank. but going from the peak of music, or at least just about to go over the hump, to absolutely nothing, was devastating. And I kind of went into a little depression of like, what the hell am I going to do? I started rethinking, like, is music really what I needed to do? And then that's really, that year in 2015 is when I really started doing a lot of session work. And I realized, like, look, I've gone this far and accomplished so much in my career thus far. Why would I stop that just now? So I started rethinking my college opportunities, and I really had two choices. It was either do I go to Berklee College of Music in Boston for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years to do my master's degree and quit my career for that time, or do I go with Berklee's really good online program and just work at it and keep pushing forward? And thank God that I went with the online approach, because 2 months later I got the call to join Ted Nugent. So going back to that mindset of you really never know what's going to happen, and kind of living one day at a time is really what I'm my whole outlook is, because you really never know what's going to happen. You could get a call the next day that to join the biggest band in the world, so you never know.
Yeah, and that is such a great, smart, and amazing way to look at it as well. I mean, when you have these opportunities ahead of you, and it's like you've built your craft so hard and so much over the years, it's just like, yeah, take every opportunity that you can. I mean, as long as you can feasibly do it, I mean, always try to see what that next opportunity is going to be, and always try to progress yourself, because you never know what's going to be coming around the next bend.
Exactly.
And I think with that right there, I think that is such a fantastic and positive note to end on. Thank you so very much for taking this time to be able to talk to me about everything you got going on right now. I mean, whether it's making new music with one of the most legendary names in rock music, to your session work, to seeing how you built up from starting at such a young age to everything you've been able to accomplish now. It was awesome to be able to get your insight into your world.
Well, I appreciate the time. It was great talking.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Before we're done, is there anything else you'd like to mention that I haven't brought up yet?
Well, I mean, you can. I try to stay as hip as possible. Even though I'm 23, I'm not the hippest millennial out there. But I try to stay, as active as possible on social media. So you can find me on the Facebook, the Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all that fun stuff. I try to keep updated in terms of cool photos from the road, the studio, and everywhere in between. Kind of an extra extended peek into my daily life. And on top of my website jasonhartless.com, tour dates and more info on my touring gear and my endorsers. And anytime I play on a record, I try to put it up there and all that fun junk.